This is The Last Laugh. I'm Matt Wilstein from The Daily Beast, and today, returning to this podcast for her fourth appearance, is a comedian and writer whose work I have enjoyed for so long. She just put out a new TED Talk called The Jokes AI Won't Tell, and she will be working out her new stand-up hour this August at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Jena Friedman, welcome back to The Last Laugh.
Thanks for having me. So thrilled to be here.
I'm so happy to have you back. Yeah. So I wanted to have you on now. I thought of you immediately after this big news about Stephen Colbert getting fired,
Right.
because you wrote for The Late Show towards the end of Letterman's run, and Colbert's Late Show has been pretty big and important in your career as well. I saw you posted something about your experience, your first time on the show, which was during that insane live election night special in 2016, which I know we've talked about before. But can you talk about, why you wanted to post that and what's been going through your mind with this news?
Well, like everything, or like a lot of things right now, there's no definitive truth, or we don't know exactly why the show was canceled. Was it for ratings? Was it because of political reasons? I mean, I definitely have my thoughts, but I think the larger issue for me, and I think for a lot of comedians, is I personally look to comedians I admire, particularly outspoken political comedians in times of uncertainty. And the fact that his show was canceled and canceled so swiftly in such a scary moment really made me sad, and it reminded me of when I was on his show on election night, 2016, when the results came in. And I said this in my post, but as scared as I was then, I did take comfort in knowing that, things are going to be okay for us as long as people like Stephen Colbert are on the air, able to say what they're saying. That at least is one sign of a democracy that is not totally in palliative care. So with this news, it's just another notch on the whatever. I don't have the analogy on the tool belt towards fascism. I don't know what the phrase is.
Exactly. Yeah, it is scary, and the idea that these shows could go away. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, when it's all there, we kind of take it for granted. And it seems, I think people have been even critical of Colbert, that he's been softer than he was during the Colbert Report, or, it doesn't seem that important until it starts to go away or be taken away.
Yeah. And it is tricky because of the economics of late night and how that has already been under the microscope. So it's easy for people to criticize, this is purely an economic decision. But then when you look at it in a larger context, which we always need to do, of just the fact that the 60-minute settlement was 2 weeks ago, and then Colbert's critique of it, as well as Jon Stewart's, was last week, and then this happened. Maybe it would have happened anyway, but just given the timing, it sure looked like they were trying to appease Trump.
Yeah, I'm not exactly buying the purely financial decision language that CBS used, even if you do concede that the economics of late night, I guess, are not what they used to be. But what I've heard people saying is sort of like, if they had wanted to fix the financial problem, there was probably a way to do that without getting rid of him, getting rid of the show altogether.
A legacy brand that has been,
and that's sort of where you got your start in TV, right? Is writing for that show.
Well, for Letterman, for sure, that was my first. That was there's no such thing as breaks anymore, but at least for me. But that was my first paying job in comedy, and then my first time that America was introduced to me as a comedian was on Colbert's election night special in 2016.
Yeah, and that was that was quite a show. That, as I said, we talked about that before. But yeah, I mean, and then you've appeared on the show a couple times since then, right? I mean, so it's been a place for you to go, and I think it's been a place for a lot of comedians. And late night in general is a place for comedians to go and get exposure in a way, thinking about Conan too is a platform that went away. That was such a vital place for comedians to go and speak and be seen, right?
All of these platforms were so helpful for at least my generation of comedians to like not have to go into podcasting. And now that those wells are drying up, I'm going to have a podcast.
You have no other choice.
It doesn't look like it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it sort of is all of a piece of this scary time to be a comedian in America, to especially be a political comedian in America. And I wanted to talk about, the story that you have told recently about your experience crossing the border. You talked to Mark Maron about this pretty recently, but for the
Mark
for the
didn't
handful
think
of,
it was an issue.
yeah, he was not that concerned about it, but for
like,
the handful
I'm
of
neurotic
people
about
who
everything but this.
yeah, for the handful of people who listening to this but did not listen to you on Mark Maron, can you share that story of what happened and when you were crossing the border back from Canada, right, in April?
Absolutely. So just to preface, yes, it is probably a little bit of a scary time for comedians, but it's so much scarier for so many other people that it's like I can't even process it as being a scary time for us. Like I'm living in Los Angeles and seeing people getting actually kidnapped off the streets for just not having paperwork on them or for being undocumented, and it's so crazy right now. So I do feel really lucky. And so, yeah, I was coming back from doing comedy at TED. The talk just came out. You can see it on TED.com. I know that also, I've said that before, that it does sound like a joke. I didn't know that TED had comedy, and I will talk about this with you later. But yeah. So I was coming back from Vancouver, and I was tired and not really thinking, and I was in the Vancouver airport. And there was no one in the airport. So I go through security, and then there's just a guy standing in front of a wing of the airport that I didn't realize at the time was like there's like a United States wing in the Vancouver airport. It was just one guy, and there wasn't even a line. I just kind of went up to him, and he said, "What are you doing in Canada?" I was like, "I was doing comedy at TED." And he said, "Were you here for work?" Oh, sorry. I'm not media trained right now. Sorry, Matt. First, he said, "Were you here for work?" Right. And I've had issues at the border before where I will like go do a comedy show and not have a visa, and then you have to it becomes a big deal. So he said, "Were you here for work?" And I said, "No, I was just doing comedy at TED unpaid," which is, they should pay us, but they just give us a stipend. It is unpaid though. Yeah. And I thought that his line of questioning was leading to, "Are you here violating some sort of like work arrangement, whatever."
Yeah, tax
law
or something. Yeah,
exactly. So I was like, I'm not being paid, I was doing comedy. And then when I said that I was a comedian, he said, "What do you joke about?" And this is stupid of me. I just wasn't thinking, I did not register that he was US Customs because I was still in Vancouver. And for some dumb reason, I just decided to flirt with him. And I was like, I joke about everything other than airport security. I don't know why I said that. I had given a good TED talk. I was high off of the talk, and I was just trying to be friendly because I was in Vancouver, where people are friendly. And so he didn't register that I was even trying to be funny. He just looked at me and was like, "What do you joke about?" And at this moment, I realized he's US Customs because I looked at his shirt and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm such an idiot." And then before I could say anything, he said, "Do you make fun of politicians?" And I just said no. And immediately he was like, "Go ahead and get through." And it didn't, I remember I went through, there's like a little gift shop there. I just went to the gift shop and I just was like looking at something to buy my kid and thinking like, I can't believe someone just asked me that. And there was a guy in the gift shop and I almost wanted to go over at him and be like, "I was just asked this crazy question." But then I was like, "Shut up, you're still at the airport, you have a flight to catch, what are you doing? Just get home." And so I got home, and when I got home, I reached out to a friend of mine who works at Adam Schiff's office because I was like, I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if I'm overreacting or if this is like a crazy question to ask. This was April 11th. And my friend sent me a meme that ICE had just put out, which I can send it to you. It was like this meme that said, "Stop ideas at the border," or like "Stop at the border, like weapons, something, and ideas." And then ICE took it down.
You have it?
Yeah, I have the meme.
You can show it we can hold it up, yeah.
I wasn't sure, I was like, I want to make sure that my friend that this is legit. So.
Stop it. People, money, products, ideas. Wow.
So I believe, I might be mistaken, but I believe that this was posted April 10th. I crossed the border April 11th. Politico reported that this U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement meme or whatever was taken down. They took it down. So that was reported in Politico. But my experience happened the day after apparently this was posted. And it's really important to convey that the guy wasn't trying to troll me or tease me. He literally was just following orders. It was such a benign but insidious question. And it made the rounds because Nikki Glazer saw, I decided to post about it on my social media. I didn't admit to saying no because I didn't want to admit to lying to customs, even though I did lie because Trump is a businessman. He's not a politician. So technically in a court of law, I didn't lie.
I was going to say, this guy obviously didn't know your work if he asked you in the first place.
He didn't know my work. Nobody, I mean, he's like everybody else.
Yes.
Nobody knows my work except for you.
I know your work, Jena.
You know my work. And so, Nikki had talked about my experience a little bit at the time.
Yeah, and then it kind of got picked up by places that this was something that was happening. And yeah, it is scary. And I think, it says something about where we are and that this happened to you and that I think your reaction to it does make sense, that it would be a scary thing to be asked.
Well, you don't fuck around when you're at the border where you don't have cameras and there's no accountability. And I also just wanted to get home to my son, and my flight was on the other, it's one of those things where, and I knew this was going to happen. In April, it felt shocking. Now it doesn't feel shocking at all because of everything else that's going on. So it was one of those things where it's kind of like is it frogs in a pot of water? Like you don't know it's boiling until it's already boiling. It feels like we're in that moment.
Yeah, and we should say that you are an American citizen, like you were coming back in, but you could imagine...
I look like Ann Romney. I mean, can you imagine? I have an American passport. I look like a Republican's wife.
Yeah, so if you were a comedian who's working here but is an immigrant and had the same situation, I mean, it could end very differently, I think.
That was the first thing I did. I have a friend, and she is an American citizen, and I believe she was born here, but she... she's not white. So, and she was coming back from the conference, and I just texted her. I was like, "Do not tell them that you're a comedian. Don't even just don't say anything like that."
Yeah. And then you ended up. Was it shortly after that you wrote that piece for the New Yorker about the shouts and murmurs? There was sort of a reaction to this. I did that, and I spent a day just being like, "What is happening?" And then fear is my muse, and I just started writing. So I had a couple pieces about ICE that came out since that happened. Do you feel any hesitation in that moment? Like, should I do this? Should I call more attention to it? Is there fear around that?
I think the people that they're going after, at least as of now, are people that are more under the radar and more vulnerable. So there's this feeling of I forget if it was Lev Parnas or somebody during the first Trump administration was embroiled in something, and then he drunkenly went on all the late night shows and was like, I forget who it was. I just feel like, just make noise, just be as out there as you can right now, because we still have that privilege. And then, we'll see. Hopefully I won't have trouble getting back in at the end of August, but I don't know.
So you were in Canada to do the TED Talk, as you said. You didn't know that TED has comedy. So how did that come about? Did they reach out to you to do something?
They reached out to me, and then on the first Zoom there were 6 people on it. I written a speech. I kept calling it TEDx accidentally because I didn't know that TED is different than TEDx. I just thought TEDx was a future. I don't know what I'm talking about. I didn't know what it was. And so I was like, I guess this is a real thing because there were so many people on the Zoom. And then the pitch was just for me to do stand up there. And I didn't even know it was a multi-day conference. So I was like, sure, I'll do stand up. And then, but then I was like, is this going to live online forever with the word TED behind me? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, so then I have to do a TED Talk. I can't just do jokes. And so I crafted a TED Talk. It's a hybrid jokey thing with TED Talks. Have you seen it by chance?
Yeah, I did. I got to watch it. Yeah. It's very funny. Yeah.
It was a very surreal experience. People take TED so seriously, and I understand why. But there's also this. See, I have to be careful with you, Matt, because whenever I say one thing that's like remotely clickbaity, you take it and you really run with it.
No, I've never done anything like that.
I mean, TED is a really interesting brand. They are selling the brand now. I believe it might go to a different, it might change ownership. And TED's done a lot of really interesting things. It has also brought people like Elon Musk on and Elizabeth Holmes on, and it kind of has ushered in this moment that we're in, or helped normalize this moment that we're in a really kind of interesting way. So for me, I did want to make fun of tech, and I was slated to speak on the robot panel. This is don't make this the clickbait thing. And they actually moved me. They moved me off the panel with Palmer Luckey, who is this guy who did a whole speech that hasn't gotten any traction. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen. He did this whole talk about autonomous weapons and nukes. And I think he got a standing ovation, and I haven't seen it picked up in mainstream media. It was really creepy and scary. The optimist in me is like, the technology's not there yet. I think with a lot of the tech guys, it's like, if you say the robots are going to kill us all, which, sorry, I said it in my talk and I didn't know this until afterwards, like their stock actually increases the more doom and gloom and hysteria that there is around tech, the more money a lot of these guys make. Because it makes it seem more
powerful
than it is.
Yeah. Wow.
So there is this thing about, it's interesting because I have a feature that I wrote, and it's about a sentient robot who it's like a sex robot who wakes up, and it's a comedy. And I was like tinkering with a third act because I didn't quite figure it out. And then I went to TED, and I realized, I was like, oh, the technology isn't, everyone thinks these things are going to be sentient. What if they're actually not sentient? What if they're just a reflection of us that think they're sentient, because every single piece of content about robots talks about them being sentient?
Yeah.
So it like helped me figure out the third act of this feature. But I do want to,
sounds interesting.
As scary as it is, I also want us to like not give it as much power as we're giving it, including myself.
Yeah. So the theme of your talk was AI and comedy, and sort of how AI could take away comedians' jobs the way it's taking away, all kinds of other jobs. You actually did sort of engage ChatGPT a little bit in the talk. What was that experience like? Was that something you did to write it? And how did you use that to figure out what you wanted to say and that part of it?
So a couple of months ago, I was playing around with ChatGPT, and I was asking it to like write me abortion jokes, and it wouldn't. And then I have this whole conversation where finally, after prompting it a few times, I asked, and then I said something to the effect of like, why did the chicken cross the road? I have to look up the original ChatGPT correspondence, but then it was like, to access its bodily autonomy. Like it ended up being able to kind of write. It figured it out, and so I posted that on social media. So then when I was working on the TED Talk, one of my most brilliant friends and writer, Jess Dweck, was like, you should hearken back to your ChatGPT conversation that you had. And so I put a version of that in. And then somebody was telling me about DeepSeek, and that joke I wrote like 10 minutes beforehand. I don't think they would have approved that joke, but it was...
That was great.
Thank you. I was really proud of it. DeepSeek is the Chinese version of ChatGPT, so I was wondering if ChatGPT won't tell me an abortion joke, would DeepSeek? And then I came up with a joke that's, yes, DeepSeek will tell you, and DeepSeek will totally write you an abortion joke, but only if it's a girl.
Yeah. That's very good. I do like that you also snuck a Louis C.K. joke in there just for fun. Yeah,
I mean, honestly, like, I don't know. I'm going to be like, poor Louis, and you're going to be like, Jena Friedman.
Yeah,
that's going to be like the clickbait
so bad
headline.
For Louis.
No, but it's just
he is headlining the New York Comedy Festival this year.
Good for him. Look, there are a lot of creepier people that haven't yet been called out and won't be on this podcast.
Yeah.
But, good for him. It's the Grammy. It's not even him. I'm not calling him out. It's just the Grammy aspect that made me laugh.
Yeah.
I'm calling out the Grammys.
But he's fine.
I mean, everyone should be able to, have a. I don't want to get into.
You don't want to get. You don't want to go there.
Thing I want to talk about.
All right, let's talk about something much less controversial. The last time I saw you perform live. Do you remember this?
Oh no!
We have to talk about this because we never got to talk about that.
About Louis. You want to talk about Israel?
Well, I just want to talk about the experience that you had on stage and that I watched, because I was at SF Sketchfest it was January 2024, I guess.
That was a wild show.
And I came to see you, and it was a very intense experience. It was, a few months after October 7th. You're on stage kind of talking through your feelings about Israel and Gaza, and you had some interaction from the crowd. So was that something that you had, was that unique for you, or what was that experience like for you that night?
Look, I wish we could be talking about all this stuff on stage. I've been a political comedian for 15 years, and this is the first time I just can't talk about stuff. And I think that, there's so much heartbreak and horror happening there. And I think that I've always felt that, like, if we can talk with people and laugh about the scariest, most horrific things, then that's a net positive, if you're coming from a place of humanity and you're, trying to be thoughtful about it. So I had a lot of fears, and I was talking about them on stage, and I did have people come up after to me and thank me for even going there, but it's so hard, and it's only gotten harder to talk about the further on we've gone through this horrific war. But yeah, no, I knew I was going to get in trouble for that. And also I do think that, people are online so much, and they're getting fed all sorts of information and misinformation, and it's making it harder for them to communicate and have conversations or even listen to people in public settings.
When I saw you, I think few people ended up walking out because they just didn't want to hear it, didn't want to engage. And I felt like you kind of wanted to, from my memory, you wanted to engage them and kind of like have the conversation, which you can't do when somebody just leaves. So that's also, a challenging thing. Would you rather people sort of stay and engage you on this stuff, or how do you think about that?
I think at that time people were a lot more raw, and I think I think people are so entrenched in their own ideologies now. There's really not conversation to be had around this topic. And so I think it's a lot harder. I think a lot of the people that are, shouting the loudest are often engaging in bad faith. And so, the reason to talk about it is to have conversations and bridge dialogue and understanding, right? And when that is no longer an option, then you just, I don't know what there is to gain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, looking ahead to your show in Edinburgh, so you're going to be working out this new show for how many weeks do you have to do like so many shows when you go to Edinburgh?
I'm going to be there for 3 weeks. I'm going to be there the
Wow.
8th to the 24th.
So is this your first new hour since Lady Killer, basically, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole new hour. Yeah.
So you shot that one, Lady Killer, while you were pregnant. I would imagine that there's some more motherhood stuff in this one because it's called Motherfucker. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was looking back at some of the stuff that you've talked about on stage and in late night and stuff since then, and led me to another Colbert clip where you got to talk about something that I think is also, I'm not sure what other show you would get to talk about this on, about naming your fetus Jeffrey Epstein.
Whenever I'm on Stephen's show, because he's such a good sport, I always like want to give him something that he'll definitely cut. And I really thought he was going to cut that because I came out and he was like, here's a picture of Jena with her baby and her husband. And I was like, stop trying to humanize me to people. You know what I mean?
Because I'm about to say something that's going to make people mad.
Yeah. And so to his credit, he kept it in, and I thought that was really cool.
How did that go over? Did you get a lot of feedback on that one afterwards?
Yeah, it went over well, and then I think a clip online upset a lot of people who are not pro-freedom.
Yeah.
Pro-choice.
What's your reaction been to our current, Jeffrey Epstein is very much back in the news and dividing the MAGA movement all over the place. How have you been taking that in?
It's all of this stuff came out years ago, before the election. I don't understand how now they're like, it's a conspiracy. I'm like, or you could just listen to like 30 women. It's really, just like listen. And also there's footage and there are photographs. I didn't know, the thing that scares me the most is the report about Trump making drawing a picture for like Epstein, some art. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that he was a failed artist.
On top of everything else.
Yeah, I didn't know that he was a failed artist too.
Well, he's claiming that's fake, and his quote about it was, "I don't write drawings," which I thought was a good quote.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. It's really dark, and it implicates a lot of people in power who are, both sides, Republican and Democratic, and I just, if this is what takes him down, great, but the damage has already been done.
Yeah, I don't see how anything takes him down. That's the problem.
Time,
yeah. As you said, we could have listened to the women in the beginning. It does feel like the victims of Epstein and whoever else he was involved with has really been erased from this entire conversation to a scary degree.
Yeah.
So your new show is not about Jeffrey Epstein, but it is about being a mother, and I think also your own mother. So can you talk about sort of what it's been like putting that show together?
It's been challenging. My mom died when I was pregnant, and I talk about this in the show, but I got back out on stage probably too soon, and I just started talking, and this show is a culmination of that. It's about losing your mom while becoming a mom, and it is actually funny. In part,
despite the subject matter,
I just didn't know what else to do. It's a way that it's helping me process my grief, and it makes me think of her, so it makes me feel close to her when I do the show. But yeah, it's been slightly masochistic. I don't know. I do feel like our culture is really grief illiterate, except when people are doing one-person shows. The only time I ever hear about parents dying or people dying is in other people's one-person shows. But I do hope that I can kind of make something that makes people feel less alone through the process. Mm-hmm. When you're going through something like that, at least for me, the only things that really helped were art from other people, books I'd read, or different things I had consumed, TVs, movies, talking to people who had gone through it. Very little helps when you're actually in the throes of grief. And so I do think that the more, and other people have said this, but I think the more we talk about it, and because when it happens to you, it almost feels like you're jumping into a pool of freezing water. It's a shock to your entire system, because at least our culture we don't exist in that world. You don't think about that or talk about that. And so, yeah, I'm just trying to kind of talk about it in a way that I can. And then also, I do feel like politically we're in a moment where we're also grieving a lot. So trying to connect the two has been interesting and kind of fun.
Yeah, there have been a lot of stand-up specials, I feel like, recently about this. Mark Maron, who we referenced, doing a special about losing his partner, Lynn Shelton. And then more recently, Sarah Silverman, her special I thought was incredible.
Good. I did too.
And so I'm really interested in that process of taking something that is so awful and scary and, as grief, and finding a way to make it funny. So what was that, you said you sort of got on stage too soon and it was raw. So what was that like for you what were sort of the first seeds of like, oh, maybe this is something that could be funny about it? Because that feels like the hardest part.
I mean, it was so dark being so pregnant and grieving at the same time. And I was on production of my true crime show. So I was like, I had to be on while I was so depleted and sad. So the comedy, in like the worst moment, I don't know, that isn't hard for me. I always laugh when I'm sad or scared. It's just more like making like a coherent piece out of it, and also still dealing with the emotions. Like I cry all the time when I think about my mom, even now, almost 3 years later. And so at first when I was doing this show, I was like speeding through those moments. Because I'm a comedian, I'm a writer, I'm like, I'm not like as much of a performer, and so it was also scary to show emotion. And then I had this conversation with a comedian friend of mine whose comedy is mostly just absurd and silly. And his father had passed away when he was, I think, in his early 20s. And I asked him, when did you stop crying all the time at the thought of your father? And he said, 5 to 7 years. And then he was like, I know that you're afraid to cry on stage because like all comedians were control freaks, but just lean into it. And then the next show I did, I got emotional on stage, and then I found jokes to take me out of that. And so there's like fun to be had with that, but it is really out of my comfort zone because like I've always been like, I don't want to cry in front of my coworkers, and I as like a comedian of my generation, like you can't show emotion in a writer's room. So I've been very in my head about it, and now I'm just kind of letting it go. So the show is like exhausting a little bit. Not to people who watch it, just to me.
Yeah.
And I'm trying, and so I'm not doing it a ton of times before Edinburgh. But it is, I think it's also cathartic and good to do. And I think, I'm at a point in my career where it's like, fine, if I have to cry on stage, I'll cry, and it'll be what it is. Robot's not going to replace that.
Yeah. Can robots cry? I think of you as being a very like dry, deadpan comedian in a lot of ways too, in some of your past work. So that must be a big change to get more emotional and do something. Does it feel like really different from what you've done before?
Yeah. And I don't know if it'll succeed. I'm going to Edinburgh. I don't know if anyone's going to come to the show. Like there's something to be like sad about your mom, but then when you're doing it to an empty theater,
yeah,
it's going to suck. But maybe people, I don't know. I'm excited about it because I'm always excited about challenges, and I love Edinburgh. And I think just the opportunity to do a show again and again and again and really hone it will be really cool. And the feedback that I've gotten has been really positive so far. So I'm excited to do it, but it's going to be a lot.
So now it's time for our segment on the show called The First Laugh. So you've done this before, so I'm going to try to ask you some different questions than I asked you last time. And starting with, is there something that you would tell yourself when you were starting out in comedy now that you didn't know that you know now that you think would have been helpful to know?
Instead of making fun of Bitcoin in that script you wrote in 2013, just buy it. Just buy it. It's like, it wasn't even like 500. I don't even know how much it was then, but I could have just bought like 2 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that would have paid for that screenplay to be made.
That's a good one. Yeah. I feel that way about ChatGPT too, that like instead of making fun of it, I should be learning how to use it.
I don't know. ChatGPT, like, it scrambles your brain. I don't think you need to learn. I really don't. It's not that helpful yet.
We'll see. Until it's really not helpful. So we talked about Edinburgh, but I'm curious about your first time going there, performing there. What do you remember about sort of experiencing that place and that festival for the first time?
It was so cool. I mean, it's changed so much. It's so expensive now. And so I'm curious I haven't been since 2019. The first time I went, I had just got a job working for Letterman. And so I was able to go over there, stay at some like youth hostel and just do a bunch of shows. That was 2011. And it was so fun. And then my friend who booked comedy at the Stand invited me to do a 2-week run in 2015, and it lined up perfectly with when I was leaving the Daily Show. So I went and I did American Cunt, which then I sold to CISO. And then my second special was Miscarriage of Justice in 2019, which I did the full month. And then we went into the pandemic, so I thought I'd never be able to sell that show. But then luckily enough, I was able to. I did a show in New York a year later, and Peacock was scouting comedy. And they were like, do you have a taped hour? And I sent them that, and that became Lady Killer. And Peacock is essentially CISO. It's the same thing. It's like,
yeah. They've all kind of shifted around, yeah.
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough at developing the hours that I've developed there. I've been able to sell, and so that's the hope again. But either way, it is such a cool experience. You're performing with all these people that I've known forever who live all over the world who I never get to see. So I get to hang out with them and watch their shows. And then you're just in the same venue with different audiences at the same time. So you really can hone a show. And because mostly my career has been in writing and directing and not necessarily as a touring comic, for me it's been invaluable to really shape a show there because touring isn't my main thing.
Do you get to see other people's shows much when you're there, or do you not really have time?
The first week you're kind of in your head putting your show together, but then I'll be able to see anything that's not. My show is at like 4:15 p.m.
Yeah.
So outside of that time slot, I'm coming for you. I'm going to see everything.
Do you have any memories of like seeing somebody for the first time in Edinburgh that really blew you away?
So many people. There's this guy, Iman Hadshidi. He's a comic from either Australia or New Zealand. And he's so funny. And I met him when we did this weird CISO show called Before the Morning After. But he always has a show there. I'm trying to think of, Brett Goldstein, the first time I saw him was in Edinburgh. Kat Cohen, maybe the first time I actually saw her was in Edinburgh. And then I got to know her in New York.
She's so talented.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people that I got to see for the first time there.
Cool. When you look back at your career so far, is there something that you said no to that you now think, ooh, maybe I should have said yes to that one?
I have a really bad joke I'm not going to say out loud.
Yeah, what? You can say it. What is it? Now you have to say it.
No, I can't. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Something I said no to that I should have said yes to? Oh, yeah, there are tons of things. After leaving the Daily Show, I was saying no to everything, and I should have said yes to everything.
We were in like saying no.
Why were they saying no? Because I was like, I want to focus on my stand-up. And I should have just been doing all the jobs, just taking every job that came by.
Yeah. Anything stand out that you wish you'd said yes to?
What are you getting at?
This is a question. I don't know. Nothing.
What should I have said yes to no, there's nothing like SNL. There's nothing like that.
I turned them down. Yeah.
I turned them down. No.
On the flip side, anything you said yes to that you now wish you had said no to? No, because you were just saying no all the time.
I don't think I had any really bad experiences. No, because I think I later realized like my true crime show Indefensible would have been something I might have like passed on a couple years before and been like, oh, you can't make true crime comedy. And then saying yes to it and going through that process, it was invaluable. So that's like the type of thing I'm thinking, like I probably said no to a lot of stuff when the industry was booming and there were a lot more opportunities.
We talked a little bit about your experience writing on the Borat sequel before, but I'm curious if there's anything that you think about now that you pitched, an idea that didn't make it into the movie, or something that like you wanted to do that didn't get in, and what it was.
Oh yeah, this is really gross. So there was a scene, like if you thought the period dance was bad, there was like this thing about, this is so gross, but it was so funny. It was like a mouse tampon where like Maria's in the bathroom and we're like, she like has like a dead mouse as a tampon. It was so gross.
A mouse?
Just like a dead mouse as a tampon. I forget the setup. It was just like, so foul.
You had to figure out how to get there, but yeah.
It was some joke, and I can't take credit for it. It was like a couple people, but it was just like the grossest thing. And I just to like scare like debutante women with like, oh, you need a tampon? Like,
Oh, here's this mouse. Yeah.
here's this dead mouse. I stick up that'll be the headline for the episode.
Dead mouse. That'll really get people in. Do you
asked the question.
I know.
You know, with comedy, it's like you have to cross the line to know where it is.
Mm-hmm. Could you imagine? Would you do another one of those movies if they come back and say they want to make a third one?
Yeah, of course.
It did get you an Oscar nomination, so that was pretty good.
Crazy.
Can you believe that? Does that seem real at this point?
I think probably because of COVID, you know, like. Yeah,
the first movie got nominated too.
Yeah, it was. The whole experience was incredible. I love working with Sasha. It was wild.
The final question that we ask on the show is there a story or memory from your career that makes you laugh now but really was not funny when it happened? So I'm curious what comes to mind.
Yeah, I remember being devastated that I can't share certain stuff. Something else that makes me laugh now that was not funny when it happened. I mean, there was that one time I've written about this, but I was shooting a piece with Asif Mambi for The Daily Show, and my note that my bosses gave me before getting into the field was, you got to be aggressive in the field. You got to make sure that you get all the shots. And we needed a shot, an exterior of a Planned Parenthood. And Asif it was like this longer wind-up, but the bit was about voter suppression, and John Lewis was in the piece, and the whole joke at the end of our piece was, John Lewis was like, the playing field must be level. So our joke was, if they're suppressing Democratic votes, let's suppress Republican votes. And one of the bits was like, by moving voting machines here, and then you cut to like a Planned Parenthood, and the sign says vote here. And so I needed to get a shot of Asif with the sign, putting the sign up, and just like you pan up to a Planned Parenthood. And we rolled up to get the shot, and I went in to ask if we could get the shot. And the women are like, we see Asif, we're fans, we just want you to know that someone threw a package on our steps and the bomb squad is coming and we don't know if it's a bomb.
Like currently, while at that moment? In
that exact moment. They're like, it's right there. And it was like, it ended up being like a pile of shit in a bag. Like, Planned Parenthoods are so under attack that the minute we roll up to take a shot of something, they're getting bomb threats or whatever. So I remember being scared shitless, but I also knew I had to get a shot, and Asif was already in position. So I told the camera operator, I'm like, okay, just get the shot and then let's go. Yeah. And don't step in that. And as I'm saying that, he steps literally in the pile of dog shit that could have maybe been a bomb.
Oh my God.
It wasn't my proudest moment. I was scared shitless. We got the shot, and then Asif, we got back into the car, and he's like, you're such a spaz. And I was like, they told me that could have been a bomb. And then he was like mad at me for putting him in that position. I'm like, I didn't put you in that position. You were already physically there. If it had been a bomb, there's really no time that would have, insulated you from being part of that explosion. So yeah, in the moment it was scary, but then afterwards it was kind of funny.
Yeah, well,
because everything was fine.
Yeah, this is the kind of comedy that I hope does not go away as the late night shows start dropping. So let's hope that The Daily Show hangs on as well, because I've been hearing some bad rumors about that. But what
have you heard? More than just the fact that they're the Paramount thing, or have you actually
just the
heard
Paramount
rumors?
thing? And that I mean that there was, I heard it could go either way. That like that show was in more danger than the Late Show, because it's sort of it's not on
more
network, and it's
fire,
not, and Comedy Central is so like I feel like all of Comedy Central could go away.
Right.
But it's sort of it's hanging on so far.
Right.
But it's scary times.
What a time we're living in. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you as always. I love having you on the show, and I really hope that I get to see this new hour. I don't think I'll make it to Edinburgh, but hopefully somewhere else.
I'm doing it in New York a couple of times beforehand.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll put a link to get tickets to all of those shows for people who want to check it out. So Jena, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.